Hello. Welcome to episode 146 of the Game Audio Hour. I'm Vince Diamante, and I sound like this right now. Not necessarily because I want to, but it's just what happens when you're working hard over the weekend and crazy stuff, things just keep on piling up, and you find that you're just running out of time and you need to get stuff done. Well, something has to give. It's not my brain, it's not my fingers, it's my throat. But regardless, I'm going to keep on going today, going solo with yet another episode of the Game Audio Hour, a weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio, from creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets. Here is where you'll find in-depth coverage and opinions related to game audio. And yes, all those other guys are busy doing stuff. They're working on their work right now. Chase, Kyle, Mike, Alex. Actually, I think Mike is probably having a little bit more fun than the rest of us because around this time of year, he makes a trip to Scotland, actually. I wonder if he's actually there right now. He might be en route. He might be stopped somewhere in the middle. But okay, he's having fun. Everyone else is hard at work. That's just the way it goes. Life working in games and audio, and sometimes even game audio. So, yeah, what are we talking about today? I've got a couple of notes to myself about some things that I think would be kind of fun. One thing that I actually wanted to mention is these speakers. There's some really cool speakers that are coming out from IK Multimedia. Some of you guys might know that there are a couple of things that I like from them. They're not a sponsor of the show. I'm just an ardent user of their products. I like some of their synths, some of their sample libraries. I actually like one of their tools called their ARC system, their automatic room correction, where in a VST plugin you can do basically have this really nice linear EQ that happens on your master bus so that you can have a really flat response coming out of your speakers. Well, IK has something that's kind of similar to that, but actually rather different. For a long time, they've been a software company, but actually in the last few years, they're rather known for their hardware. Things like microphones that will plug straight into your iPhone, stuff like that. They recently have been putting out speakers, and one of them is their iLoud micro monitors. And for 300 bucks, you get a pair of speakers that are actually really small. They have a 3-inch driver in them, so they're really not big at all. But they have really incredibly flat response because, in addition to being a speaker, there's actually some DSP that's actually happening in them. And I've always thought that this is the way to do it, right? DSP is pretty cheap these days. There are a lot of different companies that are making, various DSP chips, um, various EQs I could just throw in there and have it set to whatever the physical properties of the speaker you've got in there, and bam, your speaker is already flatter. It doesn't need to worry about the laws of physics as much. Let's enhance the bass. Let's fine tune the problems that are in the treble by virtue of the materials that are used for the enclosure of the speaker. Hey, we can use EQ, we can use DSP. So yeah, you have a really cheap, really small set of speakers that has built-in EQ, and it's flat. All the marketing material for the last year has been touting how flat these speakers are. I haven't actually really listened too much to that because, okay, marketing is marketing. But actually, one of my favorite websites for really scrutinizing speakers, this website called noaudiophile.com, they actually subjected the iLoud speakers to their bevy of tests. And they basically said, yeah, There's some issues with these speakers, but honestly, they are the flattest, best speakers that you can get in that size, in that price. And that's really awesome. They're comparing it very favorably to speakers like the JBL LSR 305s and other speakers that have 5-inch drivers. So that's actually really cool. It actually makes me wonder, when are these other guys going to get on the bandwagon of, let's add some circuitry, let's add some smarts to our speakers. I mean, how long have we had speakers that are just drivers and amplifiers in a wooden enclosure? We need to do a little bit more than that. I'm glad someone has actually put something out there that is targeted at um, both professionals as well as the discriminating audiophiles out there, people that want to listen to their musical material accurately. That's really cool. Maybe Dynadio is going to get up on that. Maybe Neumann, maybe Mackie, who knows? I want to see more companies follow this, and then we're going to have high quality speakers right out of the box. No tweaking, no having to run another linear EQ or VST plugin in our master bus in order to make things work. Your speaker itself is going to be trying its best to be flat. So that's actually really cool. I'm looking forward to checking out those speakers. $300 isn't bad. There was a time when you could get some really bad 4-inch, 5-inch speakers for $300, and now the idea that you get a really good set of them for $300. Okay, we live in pretty good times here. We're very lucky nowadays. Yeah, Brian on the live chat, he's talking about, I'm investing more into acoustic treatment nowadays. You can have great speakers, but without treatments, seems like a waste. That is absolutely true. You know, little things can actually do a whole lot of changes to the sound. Something like putting your speakers up on stands, they'll sound one way. Then you put your speakers down on the desktop, and it will sound another way. You put your speakers closer to the wall behind it because of the porting, your bass response is going to be different. Yeah, absolutely. The way that you treat your room is going to have a huge effect on the overall sound. But hey, the speakers themselves, if they are one of those things that I don't have to worry about, I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Yeah, acoustic treatment is really important, and there are obviously issues of physics there that we still have to deal with. Hardly anyone really works in an ideal room. I mean, things like bass propagation, right? There are very few people out there that are working in music and audio who are monitoring their bass perfectly accurately, because how long are those bass waves going to be? Are they in a 20 plus 30 feet long room so that your bass waves are actually fully out there before they actually bounce against the rear wall? You know, your room is always going to be a compromise. The treatment is always going to be important there. But it's nice that, at least on the speaker front, there seems to be some interesting movement there. And I'm really hoping that these speakers from IK are just a first step from that whole industry in making speakers overall not just a little better, but a whole lot better, using these smarts, using chips and DSP and EQ in order to make things just that much better. So, yeah, that was one thing I wanted to mention. I have actually some speakers coming my way, and maybe next time I'm on the show, I could tell you about that. I had to get some new speakers because I have a new room that I need to use. Uh, I'm going to be setting up my home studio again. Right now, a lot of the stuff that's here in this office, a lot of this is my stuff, so I don't actually have a home studio anymore. But in the next month or so, I'm going to be building up that home studio again, and I think that's going to be actually some fun fodder for material for the show in the next few weeks. So that'll be cool. That schedule is going to be one heck of a schedule. Balancing this thing of setting up the home studio, which is actually just a small part of this larger step of moving into a new house. That's going to be fun. Moving. Ugh. For a long time, I've lived in Los Angeles, whether it be downtown or closer to West LA. Right now, I live just outside of Culver City, and it's a really short commute on my bike over to Santa Monica, which is where that game company is. Now I'm looking forward to a really long commute because I'm going to be living in the OC. Yep, I'm moving to Orange County. Hey, it's a house, but it's in Orange County, which means I've got a commute of about an hour or so. I need to figure out what to do with that hour or so each way. Probably it's going to be audiobooks. Yeah, audiobooks, podcasts, and maybe trying to brush up on my Japanese, which I keep on forgetting. I go through lessons and then I forget them. And then I go through lessons again and then I forget them. Oh well. So that's fun. Just dealing with this schedule is has been fun. I have to figure out what am I going to be doing at home? What am I going to be doing at work? Once I get home from work, what are the things that I need to clean up? Everything is lists and timing. Ooh. But it's actually pretty good, honestly. And I'm mentioning this because there was another game developer on my Twitter feed that was talking about this idea of eustress. Now, eustress, not YOU stress or the letter U stress, but EU stress. So that nice prefix EU, which means good, and stress, eustress. It is the opposite of distress, which is bad stress, stress that you just can't handle. But eustress, what is eustress? And I think a lot of people actually engage in eustress, even if they've never really used or even heard of the term. So, for example, procrastination. How many guys actually engage in procrastination? I definitely do that. I also like to think that I engage in procrastination while still effectively doing my job. I will procrastinate on things that I fully intend to get done and get done well. Part of my scheduling is hey, I think I can do this in this amount of time. What is this thing? Maybe it's writing a piece of music. Okay. This piece of music is due on the 10th. I've got 3 hours on the 9th. Yeah, I can totally do it at that time. Active procrastination. And yeah, you can call it procrastination, and procrastination can have that very negative connotation, but it's actually a form of eustress. It is a stressor that actually affects me positively because it actually creates a real positive drive for me. Okay, I've got this amount of time, and by virtue of that time being placed there so close to when the due date is, it actually creates focus. It fosters focus and drive and concentration. And I will actually get that stuff done in that 3 hours right before the song is actually due. As opposed to, oh, okay, I'm going to work on it a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. It's actually a pretty subtle balancing act. I think that there are some things that are in my schedule, some things that are assigned tasks that actually work really well when you subject it to active procrastination versus other things where you do really need to set aside time early and often in order to keep it going over time, in order to create a certain flow with it. I'm not sure exactly how I balance it out. Honestly, it's very much a gut check. It's uh, kind of this subtle art of game development. I will hear a producer or a designer say something, and I immediately know, oh, that's something that I am going to work on right now for about an hour, and then I'm going to work on it tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And then there will be other things where the producer will say, oh, yeah, here's something, and I'll put it aside. I know I will work on this thing best if I just wait until the end of the week. It will be great. I just know it. Yeah, Sean is raising his hand in the chat room. Yeah, he procrastinates. No problem with that. Uh, Brian says procrastination gives space to be open to new ideas, I think. Yeah, there is something about process. It's hard to separate out the process from the end result that you are actually striving for. Um, I know sometimes when I am creating a sound or writing a piece of music, I have in my mind a particular process that I want to go along with that. Oh, I need this particular sound effect. Okay, I'm using physical modeling tools for that. I just okay, I'm going to be using physical modeling tools for that. And then there's going to be a little bit of a schedule that connects itself with that process versus, oh, um, that sound, oh, I know that I put something into my personal library last year. I'm going to go find that thing. It's going to be great, blah, 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 blah. And there's going to be another schedule that connects with that process, that connects with that result. Yeah. Managing yourself is an art. Working on games is an art. Figuring out all these different types of things that you need to juggle and handle. It's fun. And sometimes while you're working on it, you're creating these different stressors on yourself. And those stressors, they can be really positive stressors that result in a really, really fun result, a really good result. Yeah, I've been trying to actually figure that out. Sometimes while working on a game, I find that I actually get into a funk, not because things are really difficult or because I have a hard time actually engaging in it or the material is just not coming to me quickly. In fact, it's coming too easy. You ever get that feeling where everything's coming just fine. I'm getting the sounds that I need. I'm getting the music that I need, but I also feel like I'm dialing it in. I'm not having to think about anything. I'm not having to put any real effort into anything. And sometimes I find that I actually need to create more stressors on my work schedule, in my workflow, and my processes. I have to give myself some challenges in order to create a better result than the perfectly acceptable results that I was already getting. Sometimes that's in the form of time and active procrastination. Sometimes it's in the form of workflow. Um, one of the reasons why I like collecting different software, even software that I know I don't really use all that much, like some of these software physical modeling tools that I have. Tasman, just to do another shout out, Tasman is a really cool company and they're mostly known for physical modeling stuff. They have like that analog physical modeled strength string plugin, and there's Chromophone, which I've mentioned on the show before. I don't really use those tools all the time. I always I always think positive thoughts when I think about them. But I actually use those tools very rarely, less than once a month. But I find that those Tasman tools are actually a really good example of a positive stressor on my workflow. It's just weird enough. but it has a particular position in my mind where I have a lot of respect for a workflow that actually stems from that as a core sound producing asset. So I get into it and I get focused. And that different workflow that I'm striving for results in a really different sound and often a very positive different sound. I like throwing that wrench into the works, and it doesn't muck things up. It actually makes things really cool and different. And even though I don't use it all the time, I have this sense that, oh, yeah, throwing this wrench into the workflow is going to result in something that's good, something that's needed for what the soundscape is seems to be striving for, seems to be longing for, or what a particular game design element really needs. I I think it's really fun. I haven't actually gotten that many new software tools lately. I have been playing around with a little bit of hardware. I've got my Yamaha VLZ. Actually, one of the other dudes over here at TGC, he's actually been playing with my Yamaha VL for physical modeling. It's pretty cool. It's pretty fun. Did I say VLZ? Oh, those are those old Mackie mixers. Huh? I'm not talking about those. I don't think I've ever actually owned any of those. I just remember everyone having those back in the late '90s, early 2000s when I was going to school for music, and all those music industry guys. Hey, the Mackie VLZ. That's cool, right? That's what everyone has. Yeah, trying to do different things with workflow can be really fun. For me, physical modeling is one of those things where I'll talk a lot about it in very respectful tones, but it's not something that's a traditional part of my workflow. Um, oh man, Brian brings up the Akai S2000 sampler. I don't like those hardware sampling units. I really don't. It's just not my thing. But actually, that's not true. I do have a version of that that I will trigger from my iPad. Actually, it's pretty cool. Um, I've done that before. Um, it actually can be kind of fun, kind of inspiring, but it's just enough of a hassle dealing with syncing stuff to my iPad, and this is actually kind of an older iPad. It's an iPad 2. So, yeah, maybe I should actually try that. Actually, that's a good idea. Maybe I'll try that at some point later. Right now, I'm actually trying to figure out something else, which is not audio design, but actually music. I feel like I've actually gotten into a real funk with music, and it's not one of those bad funks. I'm churning out music. The music is coming to me easily, but I get the sense that it's not as good as it could be because the workflow has been the same for a long time. My template has not been changing. My flow through my tracks has not been changing. Okay, I'm going to lay down some piano. I'm going to mark the chord changes. All right, I'm going to extrapolate on all this into my ensemble. Good. Do that day after day after day after day. I'm actually getting into Sibelius. It's funny. I've owned Sibelius for a while, but I've never actually been good at it. Man, I don't know how you guys who use those scoring software like Sibelius or Finale or whatever, I don't know how you guys do it because it feels like there's so much stuff there that you have to deal with that really is not the music. It's it's fun. You're fighting with things like, oh, I something really simple like I've got a harp. I want to do a glissando from this C to that C. Glissando. Line. Come on, line. Why don't you connect to those two notes? It should be something ridiculously easy, and yet it's not, and it's that all over the place. Why can't I set this trill note properly? Why can't I write out this arpeggio? Why is it so difficult for me to do this tuplet here in this part of the measure? And you're fighting with the layout and that fight with the layout is getting in the way of the music making. And it's really, really frustrating, but I'm actually pushing through with it because I've got this sense that I need to start writing some music starting with the score. And if I have a workflow that starts with the score, as opposed to what I was doing for before that, starting from DAW and laying down tracks, improvising stuff, and just playing along, if I start from the score, that will actually result in some different music. And I'm really pushing myself to actually do it this way. I don't know if it's actually going to work, honestly. Most of what I've been doing in Sibelius has actually been score preparation of older music. Okay, I've got this older music. I'm going to prepare scores. I'm going to arrange it and orchestrate it and prepare parts and all that fun stuff. Not so much music writing, but I'm going to keep on pushing through with this. And I actually want to have a nice conversation with Mike when he gets back on the show later this month, because he's very much a traditional. I mean, I don't want to say that when it came out of my mouth, I feel like traditional had a little bit of a negative connotation to that, but I didn't intend that at all, Mike. I just mean, he's thinking about the music in that way. And I'm thinking about the music starting from a performance perspective where I'm just playing things in, and then I'm going to try to track that and arrange that. And I'd love to have a conversation with Mike on how it feels to switch between those different modes, and if there's a way to actually um, to quantify that difference, that change that exists when you're actually making music in that way. I think that there's a way to do it. I actually wonder if there's an even finer difference that exists between people that actually use different scoring software. Do people who use Finale, for example, create music differently because there are certain things that Finale encourages and certain things that discourages compared to something like Sibelius or compared to something like Muse Score? Um, StaffPad is actually a pretty interesting piece of software. Um, I guess not too many people know about it because it is really targeted at a very specific niche of people. People that have Windows on a laptop or a tablet that have pen input. So yeah, you talk to musicians and you're like, okay, a lot of those guys use Macs. Okay, then you get the Windows guys. How many Windows guys actually use a pen to create their music? All right, StaffPad is targeting those guys. But I was reading popular blog scoring notes, and they were talking about the most recent update to StaffPad. StaffPad has been around for a couple years now. It's in version 2 some, and they've been doing a lot of cool things. And I think what Scoring Notes is basically saying is that they get the sense that there's some big things happening on the horizon, that they actually want to make a larger leap from where they currently are, StaffPad as a music sketching tool and resource, maybe to StaffPad as a much larger piece of scoring software that perhaps would see something like Sibelius or Finale as a peer. So yeah, it's kind of fun, kind of fun. We have Sibelius and Finale as your two big heavy hitters. StaffPad is honestly, it's just a very small fry right now in the pool. You got Muse Score, which is the free option, and Steinberg finally has been they've been furiously updating Dorico in order to get it up to a good feature set. It's been out for about a year now, but it feels like only recently that people have been saying, yes, Dorico's feature set now is where it should be for version 1 software. So there's actually a lot of interesting stuff happening, and I would be really interested to see and hear if people who are different users of these pieces of software actually write differently. Oh, Sean has a little message. He said I had to download a font to put harp pedal markings in Sibelius. Oh, that's interesting. Hey, Sean, what are you using for harp pedal markings? Because I was actually struggling with this for a while, but I eventually figured out that pedal markings are pretty darn easy. I'm just using the plain old Opus font, and I do the thing where I select a passage in my harp, and then if you go to the ribbon and hit Home, Plugin, Add Harp Pedal Markings, that's how I add the pedal markings. I'll just have Sibelius look at um, the selected part, and then it will create a pedal marking based on those notes, and then I can move that into my score. I actually found it incredibly easy. I think before that, I was really struggling with fonts and actually typing out the pedal marking itself. But once I figured out that add pedal marking plugin in Sibelius, now it's honestly a few seconds of work. If I really need to do something where, oh, I'm where if I need to do something where the score actually is not totally indicative of where the pedal marking should be, well, I'll just create a measure where I am making the scale or the mode that I want the harp to be in. I'll select that measure, go to plugins, add pedal marking for that, put that in there, take out the notes that I took off. So yeah, for me now, Sibelius pedal markings are an easy thing. There are a whole lot of other things in Sibelius that I think are not easy, but pedal markings, I think I've got down pat. I think it works pretty well. I'm not sure what version of Sibelius you're on, but since I'm currently an active, avid subscriber, I'm on 8.6 something. You might want to check into that. Sonic Beat Down Productions. Hey Vince, I love the show. Play a little bit of electric guitar for fun. How do you suggest I approach picking up some theory to start composing for games? Oh, theory when it comes to composing for games. Well, what do you mean by theory? I will say that there are two types of theory out there. If you're going to be a games music person, well, there's games and there's music. Do you want to talk about music theory or game theory? I think it's really important to check out game theory. I let's see here. There's there's actually a really good book for game designers called Game Feel by Steve Swink. Actually, it's his birthday today. Happy birthday, Steve Swink. I know that most of you music guys, maybe you're not too familiar with him, but he's a pretty cool game designer, and he wrote about this concept of game feel. In this book called Game Feel, you can check it out. I'm pretty sure you could find it on Amazon. But it talks about game feel, and it talks about timing, and it talks about the way that movement and player input accelerates and decelerates and comes to a stop, and it has all these exercises about how timing on a micro level works when it comes to game feel. And I think personally that coming to a really good understanding of that helps when it comes to thinking about music. So, music theory is pretty good. I mean, when we're thinking about Western music theory, you're thinking about things like tonics and dominants. Okay, you're using medians as sort of substitutes for the tonics. And all right, you got these scales and these scales and these scales. And how am I going to structure my piece? Okay, that's cool. But what is the structure of gameplay? And the better you are at understanding the structure of play within a game, I think the better you'll be at creating music for that structure. I think one of the worst things that you can do as a game musician is to arbitrarily create music for game structures that you don't fully understand. And this is actually easier uh, than you might think at occurring. A game designer might tell you, hey, we need music for this thing. And a game musician might say, well, how many levels are in this game? All right, I am going to think about music from the structure of levels. I'll make a music piece for level 1, a music piece for level 2, a music piece for level 3. And right there, it's possible that you have actually already made a mistake. How do you know that that's actually the best structure for which music to apply to this game? Well, you don't. It Who knows? What does it mean to be a level? Is a level a world? Is a level a mode of play? Does a world actually delineate? Does a level actually delineate between player input modes? And those are actually really big questions that you have to think about. Brian's asking, does this reference also include sound design and not only composition? So when I referred to Steve Swing's Game Feel, it is not a sound or music book. It is totally about game design, period. It's a game design book. Um, I mean, my personal opinion is that you have to know about game design. And the more that you know about game design, the more equipped you are going to be at writing music for games. It that's in my opinion, that is the way it is. Now, there are actually some good books out there for music. I know Michael Sweet has one that I read, and I'm going to just look that up because I don't want to make a fool out of myself by misrepresenting the book title. So I'm just going to search. Michael Sweet is actually a long time instructor um, for music composition over at the Berklee School of Music. Yes, Writing Interactive Music for Video Games, A Composer's Guide. This is actually a pretty good book. He talks about the music writing process for games large and small. He'll spend some time talking about different methods for writing interactive music. I think it's actually a pretty good reference. If you don't know about this book, it's a cool book. It's worth checking out. It is definitely worth your $30. But I do think that knowing more about game design and how game designers are really intending for their game to be experienced by the players can only help you when it comes to writing music specifically for that game. Um, yeah, it's it's really funny, for me as a music composer and sound designer, I not really that well. I wasn't significantly trained as a music composer. Music composition honestly is something that I figured out and I picked up along the way, and I was a good enough. Excuse me. I was a pretty good music performer, and I knew enough to figure out how to analyze music and do some of that work on my own. But game design, I think, is what made me a good game music composer, not the composition part. I eventually figured out some other things when it came to music composition. I've got some new composition tricks in my toolbox that I didn't have back in the mid to late 2000s when I was first starting in the video game industry. But back then, I was a pretty good game designer. And that was actually how I got a lot of my gigs. Because even with my relatively limited music composition tool set, I was able to connect with the game designs at a very low level. Let's see. Sonic Beat saying, yeah, it's really interesting. I was just wondering about whether you can solely play off feel, or is learning scales, modes, all of that critical to your process? That's a good question. I mean, I just like pointing out that I guess about 12 and a half years ago was when Flower came out. So that was really my first really big hit as a game music composer. And in terms of the musical tools that are used in that game, it's a lot of it is D major. It's all about 5/1s, really big 5/1 chords, and every now and then doing some, some sevens and nines here and there. But it's very traditional harmony, very traditional, typical modulations. Um, it there are some places where it's a little bit jazzy, but it's actually very easy to parse the harmonies that are happening throughout that game, throughout that soundtrack. But even though I had a relatively limited musical composition tool set, I was able to connect that tool set to the game design in a really low level and coherent high level way. And that's why that soundtrack works, in my opinion. And I'd like to think that my opinion matters something for that because, well, I mean, I wrote the soundtrack for that thing. But yeah, things like scales and modes, that's cool. If you can do the modal jazz thing, that's awesome. If you are really adept at being able to quickly shift between different scales and establish feelings in the space of a measure, that's awesome too. But that's just a musical tool. Eventually, that musical tool has to connect to a piece of game design. Maybe it's a specific design technique, like switching player input modality, or a narrative technique, like how is the camera actually going to move throughout this game? And that's connected to a lot to game design as well. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's out there that surrounds game music. And there are so many different game musicians that are out there. I think that's one of my own observations when it comes to music. There are game musicians out there that are these fantastic orchestral composers that you basically tell them, "Hey, I want something that is John Williams esque," and they'll be able to do something that is absolutely John Williams esque in terms of scale and scope and structure and techniques and arrangement, and it will be great. But that's honestly just a piece of music. How does it connect to the game? That's really the important thing. So that's surrounding. There are a lot of game musicians that actually have figured out some really interesting things when it comes to how the music connects to the game. So let's see here. Just don't want to. Oh, of course. There's guys like David Kanaga. He is a really, really cool music composer, and he can do some really interesting things with music. But the most interesting thing about all of his music is that his music connects with the game design in myriad of ways. It will just do different things with each game, and that's super exciting. Um, Oh, Jeremy Soule. Brian mentions Jeremy Soule. Jeremy Soule is a really good music composer. He knows how to do a whole lot of things with his music. And actually, he's known mostly for writing music that is big and awesome and huge. And actually, that works really well because it connects to games that are similarly big and awesome and huge. The Elder Scrolls is big and awesome and huge. And the techniques that he uses in his music are coherent with the techniques that are being used in the game design, with the narrative techniques, with the cinematic techniques. So there's that coherence there. That's really important. Now you could learn all sorts of different musical techniques, but is there connection? Is there coherence there? Well, that's really important. You could have all the techniques in the world, but if you cannot engineer some coherence with the game design, with the game production, well, honestly, you're not going to be that much of a game music composer. You can be a really great musician, but to be a game music composer, well, that's something else. And it requires a little bit more understanding of what it is that your music is going to connect into. I just want to take a quick break uh, to mention that Isotope is really cool. Seriously. Isotope has been a really great sponsor for this show. Wow, for 140 plus episodes. So thank you, Isotope, for one, sponsoring the show, and two, making so much good software that we can actually, it's funny. Every time I think about Isotope, I think about it actually in a somewhat negative way because it's there to help me out when something bad happens. You know, oh man, this voiceover artist recorded something and it sounds horrible because the room that they recorded in was horrible. Can you take this out? Okay, I can rely on Isotope to actually fix that. What about this with this mix of music? This thing really needs something more. Okay, Isotope can help me out with that. There's a lot of times when I think about Isotope as not just that thing that takes you from great to awesome, but that thing that takes you from what the heck happened here with this recording, with this sound asset, go from that to, whoa, that's actually a usable take now. So yeah, Isotope, thank you for saving my butt a whole lot of times, and I'm really looking forward to you helping me out in the future with all the cool new software that you're going to come out that I didn't even realize that I needed. I'm sure that's happening in 2018 and beyond. So thank you, Isotope. Let's see here. Yeah, just a little bit of stuff more going on the chat. Yeah, music composition is a fun thing. I think that there are some really cool tools that are out there, but there's so many tools, and those tools are actually a part of your identity. Um, I don't think that you want to be just indiscriminately learning and applying all of those tools. If you are thinking about a career in the game music world, I think you do also want to think about what is your identity in this industry? Who do you fashion yourself as or like? Who do you think that you want to be as you come up into this industry? And having an idea of what tools actually go along with that identity, with that personality. There's a whole lot of tools that are out there that come in the form of, say, effects. So, Sonic, I think you mentioned that you're a guitar player. There's a whole lot of stuff that happens in the world of guitars. Besides hardware, there's software, there's a whole lot of tools that are actually very connected to being a guitar player. And can you use those tools and builds up your virtuosity in those tools in order to create your identity in this world? Or maybe you do actually want to do the modal jazz thing, or you want to go really Satriani on this, or maybe you want to do the Fripp thing, or whatever. You know, Figuring out what those tools are that you actually want to pursue virtuosity in is actually a really big part. And those tools can be used in all sorts of places. Those tools are not the same as game design. You can actually forge that connection between those musical tools and techniques and game design tools and techniques. And you can convince those game designers and producers that, yeah, look at that relationship that can exist between music and game design. Isn't that something that's worth pursuing? Isn't that something that's worth figuring out, building up? It's pretty cool that you can have an action game that is pushed by guitars. I'm thinking about what is the name of that game? Everyday Shooter. Yeah, Everyday Shooter is a shooting game where the game design is driven by the music, and the music is all guitar all the time. And the guitar is doing different things, but it is connected to all the elements of game design. It's connected to the high level of the game's level design and enemy design, and it's connected to the low level of how quickly are bullets actually firing, how quickly are enemies actually getting dispatched within this particular mode of the game. And that's kind of cool. You can have action games that are driven like that. The creator of that game, Jonathan Mack, he could have made it just a retro soundtrack, but that's not what he wanted to do. You can make it with guitars, and it can be awesome. Really, really awesome. Let's see here. Brian says, I've been doing EBM industrial for 15 years, just now learning orchestration and those tools. Orchestration is a cool tool. Orchestras are a really cool tool. I'm not sure that they are the best tool. I think that there is this incredibly positive, some might say overblown positive connotation that's connected with the orchestra. I mean, I like the orchestra. I think the orchestral sound is fantastic. There are times where I will just go home and put on this particular recording I have of the London Symphony actually doing Holst the Planets, and I'll be like, wow, that's awesome. That's a great sound. Yeah. But I do think that maybe the orchestra is a bit overblown. There are things that the orchestra is capable of, but that doesn't mean that the orchestra needs to be used in order to reach particular levels. You can reach similar levels of awesomeness, of power, of musical richness without leaning on an orchestra. You can do that with guitars. You can do that with analog synths. Sometimes you can actually have something that's actually more powerful than an orchestra because you have control over things like the precision of rhythm that you might not necessarily be able to get with an orchestra by virtue of the orchestra being recorded in a symphony hall. Maybe something can actually sound bigger because it actually has extra precision and you actually compromise on huge sound. You add precision and it actually becomes more exciting, even though the sound is not huge. Or you combine the sound of analog synths with an orchestra. That can actually be really, really fun. I have actually been playing around with this tool called Solid State Symphony. And Solid State Symphony is not a symphony library. It's actually made with synths. It is a sampled analog synth library. And those sound great. And I found that you can get some really fantastic sounds mixing that in with orchestra recordings. And since you have that really precise control over this Kontakt library, you can do some things that are actually bigger than big because you have that extra precision. You can create more rhythmic intensity because you have this precision. You can have greater excitement because of that precision and that control. And you find that the orchestra can be in a particular space, this high level. The synth can be at this other space, which is simultaneously the high level, adding to the richness, adding to the harmonics, while also creating this precision, this rhythmic drive. Orchestras are cool, but they are not the be all end all. Synths are awesome. I love synths. It's amazing what you can do with synths. I find that actually there are a lot of orchestrators that I'll talk to, and because I'm working on this music right now, and a lot of it is actually made for different synthesizers, whether it be driven by my EWI, my electric wind instrument, or just tracked into my DAW, that combined with the orchestra can make some really fantastic sounds. And pushing on that is really fun. The orchestra is a great thing to use, but I don't think it's something that you want to lean on all the time. The orchestra is not the be all end all. So hopefully I didn't spend too long going on that, but just so you know, maybe I'm preaching to the choir here, but just so you know, orchestras are awesome, but they are not the be all end all. Ooh, let's see. Wow, it's already 6:57. I'm just going to throw this out there. I'm not sure there's anything else that I wanted to talk about today, but we've got a somewhat lively chat room here. Any other questions that you guys might have, I am free to answer them. But if you don't have any questions, I'm going to mention some stuff that I am playing right now. One, Splatoon. Splatoon is cool. I really, really, really like Splatoon. And by this, I mean the sequel that just came out for Nintendo Switch. I know that there is that recent Splatfest. It's Team Ketchup versus Team Mayo. I think some guys might be surprised at this, but I am a Team Mayo person because I think mayonnaise actually sounds great. It actually tastes great. I have a problem with ketchup. The problem with ketchup is that when you use ketchup, that is the flavor that's there. Ketchup. It's just the flavor of ketchup. It doesn't really integrate into anything. Oh, it's a nice contrasting flavor. Okay, it's there with your fries. It's there in a sauce. All right, but it's the taste of ketchup. Mayonnaise, it's actually a bit more of a chameleon. So, for example, I will make a grilled cheese sandwich. I will actually grill the outside that sandwich with mayonnaise. I'll actually put a little bit of mayonnaise inside, and the cheese will melt with the mayonnaise, and it will actually melt a little nicely, a little more nicely than if I just used cheese by itself. And that mayonnaise grilled on the outside of that sandwich, I mean, it doesn't look like the sandwich was grilled with mayonnaise. It looks like the sandwich was grilled with flavored oil and egg, which is what mayonnaise is. That's kind of great, right? You can use mayonnaise in a whole lot of ways, and it just can take on a whole lot of flavors. It can add flavors to things. It can help other flavors integrate in a recipe. So I am very much a team mayonnaise person. So yeah, that's what I was rocking during Splatfest. Yep. And I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that the Splatfest was so lopsided, the same way that it was during that initial beta Splatfest, where it was team ice cream versus cake. And of course, everyone did ice cream because ice cream is fantastic. I love ice cream. I'm going to keep on eating ice cream. I'm not sure about Halo Top. I actually read an article. I think it was in Forbes, not the print magazine, because who has print magazines nowadays? No, it was on the website. They were saying that Halo Top, the low-calorie ice cream substitute, is actually the most popular pint of ice cream in America. It's more popular than Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs and Edie's and all of that stuff. I don't know what they're thinking. Whatever. Oh, Team Mustard? Yeah, if they had Team Mustard, I would have been on Team Mustard as well. I love Team Mustard. If I'm going to have a hot dog, it's going to be mustard. I'm very much an adherent to the Chicago dog style. So yes, mustard, pickle, tomato, onion, celery salt, no ketchup. No ketchup on my hot dog, please. Nope. Sonic says team barbecue sauce. Yeah, I kind of like barbecue sauces as well. Although I'm more of a fan of a Carolina style barbecue sauce, sort of mustardy, vinegary sort of barbecue sauce that they would have with pork. And Adriano says, hey, when did you join in? That's cool. Cool to see you here. But it's actually the end of the hour now. It's 7:01, so it's actually time for me to actually shut down this feed and for me to get back to work because it's just the beginning of my work week here. It's still Monday night. Got to do a little bit of more work before I head home and figure out this whole thing of moving between LA and Orange County. So fun times that. And Sean, hi Sean. I don't know if you caught the whole show, but glad to see you on here. I will be back here next week. Keep on checking us out. You can see my Twitter is Skladhill, but I'm going to be also mentioning Game Audio Hour. Whoa, my mind is a little bit discombobulated. Anyways, you can find me on Twitter as Skladhill, but the Game Audio Hour, they are on Twitter as well, twitter.com/Game Audio Hour, and putting out announcements there about the show. You can also find us and like us on Facebook, facebook.com/Game Audio Hour. So please check us out. We're going to be keeping on going for episode 147 next week, 148 after that, 149. Oh my gosh, 150 is coming up pretty soon. And hopefully we'll have the whole gang for that. I'm really looking forward to hanging out again with the crew, Kyle, Mike, Chase, and Alex. So with that, thanks to the chatties. You were really fun as always. I will see you guys next week. Bye.